it finally looks like someone may be held accountable for the SNC Lavlin debacle that happened 6 years ago. Welcome to my channel, y'all. I hope you're having a great day. Well, I saw this Democracy Watch video about 4 days ago by the time you're seeing this, and I so wanted to do a video on that on the day that I saw the video, but I was traveling and I couldn't do any videos, so this is 4 days late. So I know there's going to be a lot of people who are putting down in the comments, hey, you're really late to the game on this, and yes, I know it, but I do have some perspectives which you may find interesting because they haven't really been, well, talked about on other channels. What this has to do with is the SNC-Lavalin case, which occurred 6 years ago, and how the RCMP kind of dropped the ball in the investigation, and they may have dropped the ball on purpose. Democracy Watch wants to conduct a private prosecution on the SNC-Lavalin case with certain persons within the government of Canada. Let's first go to that news conference, and then we'll talk about it.
Good morning. My name is Duff Conacher. I'm co-founder of Democracy Watch, and Democracy Watch is one of Canada's leading democratic reform, corporate responsibility advocacy organizations. I am here today to announce that Democracy Watch is taking the next step in its years-long process to hold the Trudeau government and Prime Minister Trudeau and the Trudeau cabinet accountable for pressuring the Attorney General back in the fall of 2018 to intervene and stop the prosecution of SNC-Lavalin. And Democracy Watch has chased after the RCMP right back since these revelations were made in February 2019, filed access to information requests and pushed on those requests, and has had now more than 3,600 pages of internal investigation documents disclosed by the RCMP. And what those documents show is that the RCMP did a weak, incomplete investigation. They only interviewed 4 of 15 key witnesses, and they trusted the public statements of everyone involved in pressuring the Attorney General, Wilson-Raybould, at the time. And they also changed the standard that they used for determining whether there had been an obstruction of justice, using an incorrect legal standard for making that assessment. They also essentially didn't give any updates for years. And as I mentioned with our access to information requests, we had to pursue them and finally got full disclosure after more than 2 years of the internal investigation records. As well, the RCMP essentially characterized everything that the people said who were involved in pressuring the Attorney General from the Prime Minister on down in a favorable way, while doubting the claims and constantly essentially tilting the investigation in favor of not prosecuting anyone, and then made a secret, behind closed doors and very questionable decision not to prosecute anyone.
I just want to jump in here and make a few comments. First off, in most provinces, and I believe Ontario operates like this as well, the RCMP actually doesn't lay the charge. The charges are laid by the provincial crown. So the RCMP in BC and in Alberta, I know they don't lay the charges. We used to lay them in Alberta, but that changed after I left Alberta. It is now up to the provincial crown. The other thing I want to make a comment on is the fact that the RCMP did such a shoddy investigation. I'm embarrassed for the organization that I used to work for. And I think that this shows a level of corruption at the national level that just makes me sick. Because I can tell you for sure and for certain that if that had happened on the detachment level for a normal investigation, if somebody had identified 15 potential witnesses to an offense and they only interviewed 4, that would not be acceptable. That is an incomplete investigation. And I would argue that that actually borders on neglect of duty, which is an offense under the RCMP Act. So I just needed to get that off my chest. Now, let's go back to the press conference.
Given the evidence and given as well that the RCMP did not apply the correct legal standard in terms of reviewing the evidence and determining whether there had been an obstruction of justice, and also given that the RCMP did not consider in its investigation whether the Prime Minister or anyone else had committed a breach of trust, Democracy Watch is today filing an application in Ontario Court of Justice for court approval to pursue a private prosecution of these allegations of obstruction of justice and breach of trust. And that's what I'm here today to announce. And Democracy Watch's position has always been during the investigation that the RCMP should not have been investigating this matter, should not be investigating any matter involving federal cabinet ministers, because the RCMP commissioner, the deputy commissioner, and the heads of every division of the RCMP are all chosen by and serve at the pleasure of the Prime Minister and the Cabinet.
So just to jump in here, the commissioner of the RCMP is chosen by the Prime Minister. Now, as far as other ranks in the RCMP, there's a competitive process that they all go through, and there is a selection process that they go through, and it's made up of other officers in the RCMP. Now, at the really high levels, I think that there probably is some influence by the cabinet, maybe some pressure, but for the most part, it's just the commissioner who is chosen by the Prime Minister and the cabinet. He is a political appointee. Now, having said that, all officers in the RCMP, so white shirts and above, so inspectors and superintendents and so on up the ladder, they do receive their commission from the Solicitor General of the country. So that he may be referring to that. They are sort of appointed. They do receive their official commission from a cabinet position. So I do see where he's coming from, but there is a selection process, an internal selection process that the RCMP goes through.
And as a result, they lack independence and are vulnerable to political interference. And what should have happened is that a special prosecutor should have been chosen, not by the ruling party cabinet, not by the RCMP commissioner who serves at the pleasure of that cabinet, but through a fully independent process. And that special prosecutor should have both directed the investigation and also issued a public statement at the conclusion of the investigation concerning prosecutions. And if there was a decision not to prosecute anyone, that would have been disclosed. And obviously, if there had been a prosecution, that would have been pursued in court.
Now, I've spoken about this in previous videos, and there's been books on this. Essentially, the RCMP used to be independent of cabinet, but back in Pierre Trudeau's days, so the first corrupt Trudeau, he brought the RCMP under direct control of Parliament, and he did that because he was being investigated by the RCMP, and he wanted to put a stop to that. And other members of Parliament were being investigated. So the corruption goes back a long way. It can't fully be placed on the RCMP, though. It really goes back to the first Trudeau, the first corrupt Trudeau, when he brought control of the RCMP under direct control of Parliament. Now, having said that, I don't excuse the RCMP for not doing their job. And I do recognize that this is a corruption issue within the RCMP as well. They should be fighting tooth and nail against this control by the Parliament of Canada, because they know it's corrupt And when they don't, when the upper echelons on their RCMP don't fight against it, it shows that they are complicit in the corruption, that they are a part of that corrupt system.
Another sign of the RCMP's lack of independence and weak investigation in this situation is that the RCMP accepted the Trudeau cabinet's very restricted order in terms of what cabinet documents could be disclosed to the RCMP for its investigation, and also what Jody Wilson-Raybould, the former Attorney General, and others could say about the situation and the pressuring by the Prime Minister and others who were acting at the direction of the Prime Minister. And in what the RCMP should have done, and if there was a special prosecutor who was independent, they probably would have done, is they would have applied to court to get access to those internal cabinet communications, which are obviously key evidence concerning whether the obstruction of justice or breach of trust occurred. So Democracy Watch's position now that the investigation is over is that a judge in an open court hearing all the testimony from all the witnesses and also considering all the evidence would make a decision as to whether a prosecution should be approved and Democracy Watch allowed to pursue this private prosecution. So that's what we are going to be applying for today in the Ontario Court of Justice. And hopefully the courts will recognize and our documents that are filed with the application point out all of the weak and incomplete aspects of the RCMP's investigation. And again, importantly, that the RCMP utilized the incorrect legal standard for determining whether there had been an obstruction of justice. They used a standard that would require that there be a corrupt intent by the Prime Minister or others, and that is not the legal standard for obstruction of justice. The standard is simply that it was willful and that there was intent to do it. We hope that that process will also be done through a special prosecutor because the Attorney General of Ontario is obviously a politician from a political party, the Progressive Conservatives, and we don't want the rest of the steps of this investigation and accountability process for this situation to be tainted in any way by partisanship in the way that we believe it has been tainted by partisanship to date.
Okay, so to give you a little bit of background on all criminal cases start in what's called the provincial court. So it sounds like that should only be provincial cases, but that's not the case because the provincial crown has jurisdiction to prosecute all criminal cases. So anything that's under the criminal code. Now, there are some federal statutes that are criminal in nature, but they aren't contained within the criminal code, such as the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act. You'll find the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act in the physical book of the criminal code if you buy a criminal code, but it's not part of the criminal code. And that act, and quite a few other acts, are actually prosecuted by the federal crown. So the federal crown can determine whether or not they go forward with a charge. And they usually contract that out to local lawyers. So the provincial crown, they have their own lawyers and they prosecute all criminal code cases, even though it's a federal act, the Criminal Code of Canada. Now, what happens is all criminal code acts or criminal code offenses start off in the provincial court. Then, depending on how serious it is, they can go up to the Superior Court. In BC here, we also had, way back in the day, like 30 years ago or 40 years ago, we had another level. We actually had the county court, which was above the provincial court and before the Superior Court. And that was for serious, matters as well, but not as serious as what went to the Superior Court. But we've since got away from that. Now, we call it in BC the Superior Court. In Alberta, they call it the Court of King's Bench. Now, it used to be Queen's Bench. I'm not sure what they're called in Ontario, but this matter will start in the provincial court. Any defendant on these matters can choose to either have a trial by provincial court judge alone, or a superior court judge alone, or a judge and jury in most of these cases. So that's what the process is as far as getting the matter to trial. Now, also for private prosecutions, anybody who has enough evidence against another person can start a private prosecution if the Crown, the police, they don't forward information to the Crown to actually begin a prosecution. However, you do have to have evidence. So it's like you would hire a private investigator, or you would gather the evidence yourself, and then you would swear out an information and lay out your case to the Crown, and they can then step in, or you can hire a lawyer to do that prosecution. But you still have to have reasonable and probable grounds to lay that charge. So that's what they're talking about here, is they have done an additional investigation of some kind, or they're basing all of their evidence off of what they've gotten from the RCMP over the last 6 years, which is an insane amount of time, considering there were only 15 witnesses to be interviewed, and only 4 of them were interviewed. And then they had all of these 3,600 documents that they gathered over the years, many of which were probably emails and whatnot. So obviously this was really shoddy investigation. Now, as far as the evidence that they have, we're going to have to wait and see if this does go to trial, if they have enough evidence to prove any charges against the Prime Minister or any members of his cabinet.
In your investigation of this, what was one thing that took so long to get the documents, but were you able to find any reason why this is going on over 6 years ago now, why this investigation took so long, especially since they didn't interview all that many witnesses?
Yes. Well, the chronology in brief is that there were meetings very early on with Jody Wilson-Raybould in May of 2019 and September 2019, and meetings with others, not too much after that, initial meetings. But the other witnesses, for example, Jessica Prince, the former chief of staff for Jody Wilson-Raybould, was not actually fully interviewed until October 2020. Neither was Jane Philpott, a minister and friend and confidant of Jody Wilson-Raybould, not interviewed till October 2020. The final interview with Jody Wilson-Raybould took place in February of 2020. The Ethics Commissioner report came out in August 2019, which revealed pretty much everything that had gone on, and as did the House committee hearings. The RCMP is still hiding some evidence in the records we have disclosed. There are statements from Jody Wilson-Raybould, Jessica Prince, and Jane Philpott that have been redacted, that when they're answering key questions about what they thought of the situation, whether it crossed the line, which raises serious questions about why the RCMP is hiding those statements. Then what happened was the investigating officer, Sergeant Frederick Penzance, filed his report in March 2021 with the National Command of the RCMP, and then it has not been explained by the RCMP what happened and why they took until January 2023 to make a final decision to not to prosecute anyone. So a year and 9 months went by, and that year and 9 months is a period that has not been explained. RCMP Commissioner Michael Duhem committed to the House of Commons Ethics Committee back in February 2024 to disclose all the internal communications covering that period, and made that commitment in response to a question from an MP. As we disclosed yesterday, the letter that Michael Duhem, RCMP Commissioner, sent to the committee on April 26, 2024 was just over 2 pages and just had a very vague statement about why there had been that delay. And it essentially just said there were other things going on, a change in personnel, and that's why a year and 9 months went by between the final investigation report being filed with National Command in March 2021 and the RCMP National Command final decision in January 2023 to not prosecute anyone. Again, a secret behind closed doors decision that was not disclosed until we finally pushed it out through the Access to Information Act process in June of 2023. Unfortunately, the Ethics Committee gave up and didn't call Michael Duhem back or send him a letter back saying, you committed to giving all the internal communication records, where are they? We probably have a lot of them in the 3,600 pages that Democracy Watch has dug out over the past few years through Access to Information Act requests. But there may be some others hidden, and there is no explanation from the Commissioner. The Commissioner should be asked why he broke his commitment to disclose all of those records to the Ethics Committee when he made that commitment. He made that commitment back in February 27th, 2024.
This is totally unacceptable. They don't let constables or corporals get away with this type of shoddy investigation on the detachment level. You have to keep everybody updated, your complainant updated every 30 days. And if you don't, and they catch on and you get a complaint about that, then you get into trouble. You have to keep them updated, and you have to keep the investigation moving forward. You get what we call diary dates. So if nothing has happened between the time that you get the diary date and then you resubmit your file, or you just miss the diary date, you don't do anything, well, your supervisor, they come down on you and they say, hey, we can't allow this to go on. You have to get your butt in gear and do some investigating on this. Obviously, at the national level, when it's this high profile, they don't care about quality assurance. They don't care about quality investigations. This is just completely unacceptable.
Are you concerned that because of the passage of time and, as you can see, the perhaps loss of interest even at the committee level to pursue this to the fullest, that I think the Prime Minister's office is probably interested in this going away and delaying, and that they've actually accomplished that goal, and there's been a loss of faith in the system?
Yes, concerning the delay, this is the great Canadian way, unfortunately, and it's why Democracy Watch is also calling today for a new, fully independent anti-corruption police force to be established. Several other experts have called for this for years as well.
I've actually spoken about this in previous videos. I think that it is a good idea. Another thing you could do is actually make the RCMP independent again. And, that could work as well. But an independent corruption police force would absolutely work. Again, I've talked about it in other videos. They should have extra powers to look into the government and to be able to have access to the cabinet communications and whatnot. If they're sworn in, they all have top secret security clearances anyway. That shouldn't matter. But to keep it in the realm of the RCMP when they are so controlled by the Parliament, it's just not going to work. So he goes on to talk about, a few things regarding this and the great Canadian way of really stalling until people forget about it and things don't matter anymore. I think that this just shows how corrupt our government is. And he actually talks about an international agency that reviews corruption in countries around the world. And guess what? Canada is one of the most corrupt countries and one of the worst countries in dealing with corruption in the world at the moment. That's pretty sad. So those, I do believe that we need a complete shakeup in the RCMP, but we also need a complete shakeup in the government. But that's just my opinion. I'd love to know what you think. Put your comments down below. And while you're at it, please like this video, share it with your friends and on social media. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel and hit that bell notification so you never miss another video. Also, please join me on Thursday evenings at 6 p.m. Pacific time for my live stream, where you're invited to join in on the conversation. And that's on both YouTube and on Rumble. Finally, if you reside on Vancouver Island and you want to get your Canadian firearms license, I teach the required courses. There's a link in the description of this video to my website where you can sign up to take one of those courses. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.